Hey guys, Ezra here. Welcome back to another Ezra review. And today we're going to be reviewing this movie called The Running Man. It was directed by Edgar Wright and star Glenn Powell. Now, this is the second adaptation of the Stephen King novels, and it stars follows the character named Ben Richards as he's trying to join the Running Man competition, and he needs to survive for 30 days to win $1 billion, in order to save his family from poverty essentially. And yeah, this movie is different compared to the first Running Man, or I guess like the first adaptation of the Running Man, which is from the 80s, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I gotta say, I did have some expectation and hype to see this movie, because mainly because of the director, and I also love the main stars, Glenn Powell. I think he's a charismatic actor, so I love him. And I gotta say, man, after seeing this movie, I was actually disappointed, but I'm gonna get to that later, and I will compare this movie a lot to the 1987 movie because, like, well, it's like the adaptation from the two Stephen King novel. I think Arnold Schwarzenegger version are did something different compared to the novel. I think again the way this movie was sold is that Edgar Wright's movie is actually much more faithful to the novel. But I kind of get a feeling that maybe the 1987 movie does a good job for changing certain elements, which again, I'm going to get to that later, But for this review, of course, we're going to be talking about the good part first, and then there is going to be some mixed part in my opinion, and then there will be some negative aspect, and we're going to be here talking about the negative aspect about the movie because there's a lot of this movie has a lot of problems, sadly, But for the positive aspect first, I mean, the directing and the cinematography, I think, are beautiful. I think this movie is beautifully shot, and I also love the performance by the actors, Glenn Powell, and then so many supporting, characters as well, like Josh Brolin, and then Williamhmacy, and then leepace, and then like I think the host of the show named Bobby T, played by Colmandomingo. Like all the actors here are having fun in their performance, and I also think the score by Stephen Price is also pretty good. I love them. So yeah, that's the positive aspect about the movie, guys. Not it's not a lot. It's not a lot. I gotta be honest. And for the mixed aspect about the movie is actually the action sequence. Because again, the action sequence at times feels fun, but it doesn't feel memorable. There is no one action sequence that I was like, man, I'm gonna be remembering this action sequence because they were so mind blowing. Like, no, there is not a single action sequence that makes me go like insane. I still think they are well shot and they are fun. At the when it happens on the screen. But I don't think it's enough to keep me engaged with the action sequence. Because I think the action sequence are not that creative. It feels kind of generic at times, and even though I think Glenn Powell does his best, in the action sequence, I don't think it does. Again, it doesn't blow my mind. It doesn't feel as special, and I think that's disappointing, because I think from the trailer, I was expecting the action sequence to be, that amazing, and I think Edgar Wright are known for creating some amazing action sequence, in his movies. But I think this movie lacks his vision in a way, and you can definitely felt that, and I think that's what the action sequence feels kind of like it's okay, like it's just like, yeah, it's fun, but it's also like it doesn't feel as special in my opinion. I would not be remembering any of that, to be honest. Except maybe like the end fight in the plane sequence. I think that's like the best action sequence in the movie. But I think besides that, it was like, yeah, I mean, it's a fun ride, but it doesn't do much. So there's that. So for the negative aspect, I think there is a lot. First of all, I think the story, I think the story and the commentary, it doesn't work in my opinion. And of course the characters of Ben Richard himself. And I will be comparing the some of the negative aspect to the 1987 movies, because again, I think the 1987 movie, in my opinion, does a better job with the characters and the storyline, and especially the tone and the pacing of it, because like the tone and the pacing of this movie is all over the place. Like the pacing feels weird at times, where if it like again, there is no momentum, there is no adrenaline. Like this movie really lacks of like adrenaline, because again, it's called The Running Man, so I was expecting the movie to like keep ramping up and ramping up until the very end, while it reaches its peak. but it never happens. This movie feels like, up and down and then up and down again. It feels like a wave, that is just like, okay, like that. It definitely it kind of makes me less engaged with the movie. I remember when I was like halfway through the movie, I was like, man, like is there something exciting going to happen here? Because I was like expecting big action sequences or like the story keep ramping up, but it never really reaches that moment, which is quite disappointing, and also the tone, I feel like it was I don't know, like something, the tone kind of feels like clashing, where it was like, is this supposed to be a serious moment or is this supposed to be a comedy? Like, I have no idea, because like the movie is really weird that sometimes it doesn't sometimes it can't decide whether it was supposed to be funny or it was supposed to be serious. And I think Edgar Wright was known for combining those two elements in his movie, but I feel like in this movie, again, his vision is lacking here, because I don't really feel the tone that well. That I have no idea if some of the moment was supposed to be funny or not, so yeah. And there's that, and of course the characterization of Ben Richards, so in 1987, Ben Richards was played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, so it's pretty much like the typical 80s action movie, and it does work. But in this movie, it feels like Ben Richards was much more accurate to the novel, apparently. And in this movie, he's not exactly like a cop or like an expensive force or whatever, just like Arnold Schwarzenegger. No, he's a different characters, and he's just like a dad that has like a peak physical body, and that's it. And the one thing I do not like about how they handle Ben Richards' character, it feels like he's just there for the ride. I never feel fearful for him, or I never feel the tension in the movie, because every single time like there is about to be tension happening, there is some like plot conveniences that happen every single time, that I was like, this is just so convenient, it feels like pitch meeting, where it's like super easy, barely inconvenience, and like yeah, there's a lot of that moment here in this movie where Ben Richards are like trying to avoid the running man, the hunters of the running man, and then and then he has to hide, he has to plan his escape and something like that. And there's only like one scene where Ben has to plan his escape, and I guess maybe two by the end of the movie. But for a lot of times, it was there is a lot of plot conveniences, because like he met with many side characters that was just there to guide him through the conflict. And I think it's just like, oh, like that was convenient, I said it a lot. I said it a lot because it is convenient, where Ben Richards was able to randomly found these side characters, and this side character just happened to be a smartest man ever, and then he was able to guide Ben throughout the game. And I'm just like, well, that was disappointing in it, because I was expecting Ben Richards to be like using his wits, using his intelligence maybe to outsmart the hunters, and using the environment to escape, like planning his survival for the next 30 days. I was expecting that, and it feels like it was building towards that in the beginning. But as the movie progressed, I realized that yeah, he doesn't do that at all. He's just there for the ride. Like if he like these side characters that helps Ben. Like just imagine here, they were the driver, where Ben was just like in the passenger seat, just like, wow, this ride is cool, guys. Like just a normal passenger throughout this entire conflict. That I just feel that it completely undermined the tension in this movie. Because here's the thing. In 1987, Arnold Schwarzenegger is obviously like Ben Richards, right? And then his version of Ben Richards was actually much more intimidating, and actually, like, again, I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger, so he has a huge, body build, and then he appears intimidating and feels believable to be a badass, especially his backstory was kind of changed, where he was actually working for the network, and then he was also like a special military force or whatever. Like, he has ability to fight, that's my point. And that's why I think in the 1997 movie, it feels much more entertaining to see Ben Richards ripping out the stalkers. Well, in this movie, Ben Richards was like, I don't know, he's just a normal guy that was there for the ride. Like he sometimes improvise certain scenes, but he doesn't do much in the conflict. He was just there along for the ride, and all these side characters that was there to help Ben, and they were actually the one who's doing this hard work for him. And I just don't find that to be believable enough, especially also in 1997 there is like a resistance group, right? And then Arnold Schwarzenegger was able to lead the resistance group against Killian, and I think that was much more believable and much more consistent. But in this movie, there is no resistance, I think the people just like randomly believe in Richards because like, oh, Ben Richards is still alive, and I'm just like, well, okay, but I don't really feel the impact, because in the 1997 movie, I feel like the tension and then the impact, and like the excitement when every single time Arnold Schwarzenegger's Ben Richards are killing the stalkers, because it feels satisfying. I was actually rooting for him, like, yeah, kill the stalkers, it was so satisfying to show Killen and show the audience back in 87 that, hey, you're messing with the wrong guy, like you mess up, buddy. But in this movie, I do not get that feeling at all. I think the movie tries to be like, oh, you're messing up. They're messing with the wrong guys. Like Ben Richards are absolutely smart or something like that. But not really. He doesn't do anything. He was just super duper lucky in this movie. Many plot conveniences, and I'm just like, man, that was such a disappointing aspect about the movie. Because I did not expect Edgar Wright movie to be like convenient. It was just like, okay, that happened, cool, I guess. And the people in this movie starts to believe Ben Richards, kind of like how in 1987, where the people also start believing in Ben Richards, except in 87 version, it was much more believable because it shows that Ben Richards was a badass and killed a lot of these stalkers. So that's where the people starts to believe in him, like, yeah, Ben Richards lived, but in this movie, the people start to believe in Ben Richards because he was so lucky that he was still alive for like 17 days, 20 days, and that's where people start to believe in him. And I'm just like, okay, like, it doesn't, again, you don't feel the impact, of his character in this movie, and that was the most disappointing aspect in my opinion. Like the 1987 movie are much more consistent, even though, again, it was cheesy, but it was much more consistent. Also, I want to compare the hunters in this movie and the stalker in 1987, because the stalkers in 87 Running Man, they were actually much more memorable because they have distinct personality, they have distinct look to them, they even have distinct power. There is a gimmick to in the stalkers in 1987 Running Man, and that's what they are memorable. That's what they are fun. But they're in this Running Man. They call the hunters. I don't really see the differences. There is no special gimmick for each of the hunters. There's 5 hunters hunting down Ben Richards in this movie, but the hunters all look the same, and they don't feel intimidating at all, and they only focus on one hunter played by leepace named Evan McCone, or like Colman McCone, they call him in this movie. Like, he's the only hunters that has a presence in this movie. All the other 5 hunters, they just there. And there is even a scene in the movie where Ben managed to kill some of the hunters. I don't even know that they were supposed to be a hunter. Because, like, again, eventually the movie, like, the host of The Running Man, Bobby T, announced on television that, oh, Ben Richards was actually able to kill the hunters there. That was amazing. And I was like, oh, that was a hunter? Like, I did not notice that. I was thinking that, oh, he's just killing a henchman, because these hunters looks like a henchman in this movie. I did not even realize that they were supposed to be the hunters, like these people are supposed to be professional, but I don't really feel frightened by them, they don't really feel that special because there is a lack of distinct personality between all the 5 hunters. They feel the same. They might wear different costume, but they still feel the same. I guess except for leepace hunter, McCone, that he's the only one that has a personality because, like, well, he's the hunter that we focus the most of. And there's even a twist with this character that I think is kind of cool in my opinion. But the other 4 hunters is, again, they're kind of there, and sometimes appears like a henchman, and I don't even realize that Ben already killed them until they announced that on the show, which is like, oh, okay, apparently there's a hunters. Okay, sure. And also, I also want to criticize how dumb some of the hunters were, because, like, there is another character in this movie called Laughlin, which is like, we know that from 1987 movie, except this Laughlin in this movie are a female characters played by Kathy O'Brien. And Laughlin in this movie is just nothing. Like, there is no character development for her at all. She was just there. And sometimes we kind of like, checking back on her, I'm just like, well, okay, I don't really care for this character. They don't even try to build her characters, I guess it's kind of weird, because, like, Laughlin in 1987 version is actually like a pretty substantial counter to the plot and to Ben Richards himself, that he was actually part of the resistance group. So I was expecting, like, maybe like there is like maybe there is some revealed that Laughlin is gonna be like part of the resistance group, that this was only this is actually part of our master plan to take down the Running Man show. I was expecting that because of like what I saw from the 1997 version, but not really. Laughlin is just a nobody character in this movie. So, and also the scene that features her, this is also why I wanted to criticize the Hunters. The Hunters feel so dumb. Even McCone's character, which was there trying to kill Laughlin in like in a casino that you see in the trailer, like Laughlin was actually like standing like several feet away from him, I guess, and then like this guy was supposed to be like a professional assassin, and for some reason they can't even shoot Laughlin, even though she was just like running around frantically, sure, but none of the shot hit her. Which I'm just like, what the hell was that? That took me out, because I thought that the Hunters were supposed to be a professional killer, but they can't even shoot properly. Everybody in this movie is a terrible shooter, which is just like, what the hell, like in 1997 you don't get to feel that because again they have different power. So okay, makes sense to me, right? But in this movie, they're all using guns to kill people. And for some reason, even though they were supposed to be a professional, they keep missing their shot. Even though that the target was like several few feet away, or like maybe even centimeters away from them, and they can't even shoot the target properly. And that took me out of the movie. I was like, oh, okay, so these guys suck. You can't even shoot at a moving target. Like, come on, man. You're supposed to be a dangerous assassin, and you can't even shoot a moving target. Like, come on, man. Like, it's not even like a frantic movement as well. He was just like running away, and for some reason, like McCone, he tries to shoot her, like he tried to shoot Laughlin, and then he keeps missing the shot. Like, what the fuck? I'm just like, man. And also the one thing that I want to criticize finally is actually the villain. Dan Killen played by Josh Brolin, and then Bobby T played by again Colmandomingo. Like they both are having fun in this movie, but 1997 version actually does some better job, because I think the changes that the 1997 movie does is actually the right changes, where they combine Bobby T's character and Dan Killen's character. Damon Killian in 1997, he's the host of the Running Man. He's also like the creator of Running Man. So it's much more consistent in the 87 version, because like he was consistently there hosting the show, gloating, and like has a big ego and stuff like that. So you really wanted to see the guy die in the hand of Ben Richards, at least in 1987 movie. But in this movie, because they split the two characters, Dan Killen and Bobby T, that you're supposed to have these two characters, but I just don't really like how they handle Bobby's character, because in the beginning when they introduced Bobby T's character, he's a narcissistic, he has a big ego, like, oh, be glad that you meet me, child, because I'm also a human like you, which is like, okay, like a very huge narcissistic character there. But in the end, like supposedly they tried to redeem the character by using one line against Dan Killen, and I'm just like, okay, that's weird. I still don't care about you, man. I think you still deserve to die because you are hosting the Running Man show, and you are clearly has a big ego, because that's how the characters was introduced. But for some reason, in the end there, we were supposed to sympathize with the character, which I'm like, oh, okay. Like, spoilers, it doesn't work. I don't really care for him, so whatever, fuck him, Still, I don't like him, but for some reason the movie tries to redeem his character, which is like, why would you do that? It's just so weird. And also because they're splitting the villain here. Dan Killen barely had any screen time in the movie, so I don't really feel the immense hate, for Dan Killen, unlike in 1987 where I really hate Killen in that movie. But in this movie, I don't really care, because like it focused on Bobby and it focused on Killen, so I'm just like, okay, like I guess I have to hate both of them, right? They're both the villain. They're both a villain in this movie, but not really. Like Killen was like buried there again. Josh Brolin, I think, does a good job performing the characters. Again, he's having fun, but I don't really feel like the immense hate, for, oh yeah, Ben Richards, please kill Killen. Like I don't really feel that in this movie. I'm just like, yeah, I mean, I guess you kill them, cool, And same thing with Bobby's character, which I think just really, really weird how they decide to do that to the characters by the end of the movie. I'm just like, okay, you're not even committing for him to be the villain, which is like, okay, that's weird. And also the ending of this movie is also, I feel there's a lot of moments you have to suspend your disbelief in the plot point, because like the way the 1997 movie works, it feels consistent. Ben Richards are a strong guy. You see them killing the stalkers, and then eventually leading a resistance group, and then eventually telling the truth to the public, thanks to his girlfriend in that movie. So it makes sense, it was consistent, and in this movie it feels so inconsistent because there is no resistance. It's just the people, and somehow Ben Richards was able to convince these people to, I don't know, like join his move, join the movement or whatever, something like that. Which is, I have no idea. It's just so weird, I don't find it to be that believable in my opinion, and I think the ending feels like, okay, so like this moment lead to this moment, and this moment to lead this moment, and eventually leads to this moment in the ending, so it feels like you have to suspend your disbelief, because it was so unbelievable how much these moments are connected, even though they are so different from one another, and just like, okay, I guess it leads to this ending. Cool, I mean, sure, yeah. But the end of the original 1987 Running Man feels believable in my opinion, so this movie is not. So yeah, either way, that's my review for The Running Man. Again, it's a disappointment for me because I feel the hype. I am hyped to see this movie because of Edgar Wright and Glenn Powell, and I think they both are like kind of disappointing. Even though the movie is beautifully shot, and then Glenn Powell has a great performance in this movie, it's not enough to save the movie, because everything else sucks. This movie is pretty much like a potential movie that could defeat the 1987 version if they actually did it properly, but they didn't. It was a disappointment at how much plot conveniences happen in the movie left and right, and you have to suspend your disbelief heavily to believe like how the characters achieved this in the movie, So yeah, that was disappointing, But either way, guys, that's my review for The Running Man. I guess let me know, guys, in the comment section below, what do you guys think about this movie right here? Do you guys have any favorite action sequence, So let me know all your opinions about that in the comment section below. And if you guys enjoyed my movie review, then make sure, guys, leave a shoot and kill the subscribe and like button, and share the videos to your stuff, and stay tuned for more movie reviews in the future. And again, I hope you guys enjoyed this movie review, and I will see you guys in the next one then. Bye!